What started as a routine late-night interview turned into television's most explosive confrontation when Jennifer Aniston was kicked off Stephen Colbert's show after a heated clash that left audiences stunned and social media in uproar. The Late Show studio buzzed with its usual pre-taping energy as Jennifer Aniston settled into the guest chair, her radiant smile masking what would soon become one of the most uncomfortable moments in late-night television history. The audience, packed with devoted fans, erupted in applause as Colbert launched into his opening remarks with characteristic smugness. "Jennifer, always a pleasure to have you back," Colbert began, his tone already carrying an edge that seasoned. Viewers might have recognized as trouble brewing. "I have to say, you look fantastic for someone who's been making headlines for all the wrong reasons lately." Aniston's smile faltered slightly, but she maintained her composure. "Thank you, Stephen. Though I'm not sure what headlines you're referring to." The first red flag came when Colbert leaned back in his chair with that familiar smirk that had become his trademark. "Oh, come on, Jen. The whole Friends reunion drama? The rumors about your personal life? The way you've been handling criticism about your recent projects?" His voice carried a mocking undertone that seemed to catch even his own producers off guard. "I think there might be some misunderstanding," Aniston replied, her professional demeanor intact despite the obvious tension. "I'm here to talk about my new film and some exciting projects coming up." But Colbert wasn't backing down. In fact, he seemed to be doubling down on whatever agenda he'd brought to the interview. Right. The new film. The one that's been getting mixed reviews? I mean, let's be honest here, Jennifer. When was the last time you were in something that people actually talked about for the right reasons?" The studio audience shifted uncomfortably in their seats. This wasn't the playful banter they'd come to expect from late-night television. There was genuine malice in Colbert's voice, and Aniston's body language was becoming increasingly defensive. "Stephen, I'm not sure what's gotten into you tonight, but I came here in good faith to have a conversation," Aniston said, her voice remaining steady but her eyes showing the first signs of real irritation. Colbert's response was even more shocking. "Good faith? That's rich coming from someone who's built a career on playing the same character over and over again. I mean, how many times can you play the lovable, slightly neurotic woman before people get tired of it?" The attack was personal, unprofessional, and completely out of left field. Even the camera operators seemed taken aback, with one clearly visible adjusting his position as if unsure whether to keep rolling. The audience had gone completely silent, the kind of uncomfortable quiet that fills a room when everyone knows they're witnessing something that shouldn't be happening. Aniston straightened in her chair, her media training kicking in as she tried to navigate this increasingly hostile situation. "I think every actor brings something different to each role they take on. That's the beauty of storytelling, finding new ways to connect with audiences through characters that might share certain traits but exist in completely different worlds." "Oh, please," Colbert interrupted, waving his hand dismissively. "That's just PR speak. We all know you've been coasting on Friends residuals and rom-com fame for decades. When's the last time you took a real risk? When's the last time you did something that actually mattered?" The question hung in the air like a loaded weapon. Several audience members could be heard whispering to each other, and at least one person near the front row was visibly shaking their head in disbelief. This wasn't entertainment anymore. It was character assassination being broadcast live. Aniston's jaw tightened, and for the first time since sitting down, her composed facade began to crack. "I've been fortunate enough to work on projects that have brought joy to millions of people around the world. I'm proud of that work, and I don't feel the need to justify my career choices to anyone, especially not someone who seems more interested in tearing people down than building them up." The rebuke was measured but firm, and it seemed to only fuel Colbert's increasingly erratic behavior. He leaned forward, his voice taking on an even more aggressive tone. "Joy? Is that what we're calling mediocrity now? Because let's be honest about what Friends really was. A show about privileged white people complaining about their privileged white problems while living in apartments they never could have afforded in real life. The attack had shifted from personal to cultural, and Aniston's expression hardened completely. "I think you're confusing entertainment with documentary filmmaking, Stephen. Friends was a sitcom that provided escapism and laughter during difficult times for a lot of people. If that's mediocrity to you, then I guess we have very different definitions of success." "Success?" Colbert laughed, but there was no humor in it. "You mean financial success? Because that's really what this is all about, isn't it? The endless cycle of nostalgia marketing and reunion specials designed to squeeze every last dollar out of a show that ended 20 years ago?" The audience was now openly uncomfortable, with several people near the back starting to get up and leave. The energy in the room had become toxic, and everyone could feel it. Even Colbert's house band looked confused and concerned, exchanging glances that suggested they'd never seen their host behave this way. Aniston took a deep breath, clearly trying to find a way to salvage what had become an impossible situation. "Stephen, I'm not sure what's really going on here tonight, but this isn't the conversation I came here to have. Maybe we should take a break and reset." But Colbert was far from finished, and his next words would push the confrontation to a point of no return. "Let's talk about what really matters, Jennifer," Colbert said, his voice dripping with condescension. "Your little activism phase, all those Instagram posts about social justice and climate change. Do you really think anyone takes you seriously as a political voice, or is this just another way to stay relevant?" The question hit like a slap across the face. Aniston's composure finally began to crack as she realized this wasn't just a bad interview. It was a deliberate ambush. "My advocacy work is something I care deeply about, Stephen. I use my platform to raise awareness about issues that matter." "Your platform?" Colbert scoffed. "You mean your privilege? It's easy to lecture people about climate change when you're flying around in private jets and living in million-dollar mansions. Don't you think there's something hypocritical about that?" The attack was calculated and vicious, designed to undermine not just her career but her character. Several production assistants could be seen frantically gesturing from the wings, clearly trying to signal for some kind of intervention. But Colbert pressed on relentlessly. "I do my best to live responsibly and make conscious choices," Aniston replied, her voice now showing real strain. "I'm not perfect, but I believe in using whatever influence I have to make a positive difference." "Positive difference?" Colbert's laugh was harsh and mocking. "Like when you stayed silent during the Harvey Weinstein scandal for years? That was certainly a choice, wasn't it? Very courageous." The room went dead silent. Even the cameraman stopped moving. This had crossed every line of professional courtesy and human decency. Aniston's face went pale, then flushed with anger and hurt. The accusation was not only cruel, but fundamentally unfair, weaponizing a tragedy that had affected countless women in Hollywood. "That is completely out of line," Aniston said, her voice trembling with controlled rage. "You have no right to use other people's trauma to score points in whatever sick game you're playing here." But Colbert seemed emboldened by her reaction, leaning back in his chair with that same smug expression. "Oh, so now we're playing the victim? That's convenient. It's always easier to deflect than to take responsibility, isn't it?" The audience was now openly hostile toward their host. Someone in the back row shouted, "That's enough," while others began booing. The situation had completely spiraled beyond anyone's control, and yet the cameras kept rolling, capturing every excruciating moment. Aniston stood up abruptly, her chair rolling backward. "I'm not going to sit here and be attacked by someone who clearly has some personal issues he needs to work through. This is supposed to be entertainment, not a public execution." "Sit down, Jennifer," Colbert commanded, his tone now openly authoritarian. "We're not finished here. You came on my show, and you'll leave when I say you can leave." The words hung in the air like a threat. Security personnel near the stage began moving closer, unsure of their role in this unprecedented situation. The house band had stopped playing entirely, and even the most seasoned production crew members looked shocked by what they were witnessing. "Excuse me?" Aniston's voice rose for the first time all evening. "You don't own me, Stephen. This isn't your personal therapy session, where you get to work out whatever anger you're carrying around." Colbert's mask of television professionalism finally slipped completely. "My anger? You want to talk about anger? How about the anger of viewers who are tired of being fed the same recycled garbage by people who think they're better than everyone else? If you hate what I do so much, why did you invite me here?" Aniston shot back, her own anger now fully unleashed. Was this all just some elaborate setup to humiliate me on national television? The question caught Colbert off guard for just a moment, but he quickly recovered, doubling down on his hostile approach. "Maybe it's time someone called you out publicly. Maybe it's time people stopped pretending that mediocrity deserves celebration just because it comes with a pretty smile." The personal nature of the attack was breathtaking in its cruelty. Even viewers watching at home would later describe feeling physically uncomfortable witnessing such a public dismantling of someone who had done nothing to deserve it. The toxicity had become so thick, it was almost tangible. Aniston gathered her purse and stood firmly. "I came here as a guest, with respect, for you and your show, but I won't stand here and be your punching bag because you're having whatever crisis you're having." As she moved toward the edge of the stage, Colbert made one final devastating move that would seal his fate and ensure this confrontation would be remembered as one of television's most shocking moments. "Running away again, Jennifer," Colbert called out, his voice projecting across the studio with calculated cruelty. "Just like you ran from every real challenge in your career? Just like you ran from taking any real risks? I guess some people are just born to be followers, not leaders." Aniston stopped dead in her tracks, her entire body tensing. The studio fell into a silence so complete that the hum of the air conditioning became audible. Even the most seasoned television professionals in the room knew they were witnessing something that would have consequences far beyond this single taping. She turned back to face him, and the look in her eyes was unlike anything the audience had seen before. "You know what, Stephen? You want to talk about running away? Let's talk about how you're hiding behind this desk, using your platform to bully someone who came here in good faith. That's not courage. That's cowardice." The comeback hit its mark, and Colbert's face flushed red with embarrassment and rage. Several crew members could be seen frantically making phone calls, presumably to network executives who were about to have the worst night of their careers. But instead of backing down, Colbert stood up from behind his desk, abandoning any pretense of this being a normal interview. "Cowardice?" he snarled, moving closer to where Aniston stood. "I'm the one willing to say what everyone else is thinking. I'm the one with the courage to call out the Emperor's new clothes. You've been coasting on nostalgia and good looks for 20 years, and nobody's had the guts to say it." The physical proximity added a menacing element to the confrontation that made everyone in the studio deeply uncomfortable. Security guards positioned themselves strategically, ready to intervene if the situation escalated further. The audience began murmuring among themselves, with many people reaching for their phones to capture what was clearly becoming a historic television disaster. "If that's what you think courage looks like," Aniston replied, her voice steady despite the obvious stress, "then you have a very twisted understanding of the word. Real courage is building people up, not tearing them down for your own entertainment." Colbert's response was perhaps the most shocking moment of the entire confrontation. He began slow clapping, the sound echoing through the studio like gunshots. "Beautiful. Just beautiful. Did you rehearse that little speech, or does the sanctimony just come naturally?" The mockery was so blatant, so deliberately cruel, that several audience members began standing up and heading for the exits in disgust. The energy in the room had become genuinely disturbing, transforming what should have been light entertainment into something approaching psychological warfare. "You're sick," Aniston said simply, and the directness of the statement cut through all the pretense and performance. "Whatever is going on in your life that's making you act this way, I hope you get the help you need. But I won't be your victim." The word victim seemed to trigger something even darker in Colbert. "Victim? You're calling yourself a victim? You're a millionaire actress who gets paid to pretend to be other people. You've never been a victim of anything except your own limited talent." The studio audience erupted in boos and catcalls directed at their host. Someone near the front row shouted, "Shame on you!" while others began chanting, "Let her go!" The mob mentality had completely flipped, with the very people who had come to see Colbert now turning against him in real time. Production assistants were visibly panicking in the wings, with one clearly on the phone with what appeared to be network executives. The show's producers were frantically gesturing, trying to signal for a commercial break that would never come. This was live television at its most raw and uncontrolled. Aniston began walking toward the stage exit again, but Colbert wasn't finished. He followed her, abandoning his position entirely and pursuing her like a predator stalking prey. "Where are you going, Jennifer? Can't handle a little honest criticism? Is this how you deal with all your problems? Just walk away?" The pursuit was deeply unsettling, crossing every boundary of professional behavior and common decency. Even viewers at home would later report feeling genuinely afraid for Aniston's safety, as they watched a television host completely lose control in real time. "Stay away from me," Aniston warned, turning back to face him with genuine alarm in her voice. "You're acting completely unhinged, and frankly, you're scaring people." Her words seemed to penetrate Colbert's rage-fueled haze for just a moment, and he looked around the studio as if seeing it clearly for the first time. The audience was openly hostile, his crew was in chaos, and he had just chased a guest across his own stage like a madman. But instead of coming to his senses, he doubled down once more. "Scaring people?" He laughed bitterly. "The only scary thing here is how long the entertainment industry has been lying to itself about what passes for talent these days." That final insult pushed the situation beyond any hope of recovery, setting the stage for a conclusion that would end careers and change television history forever. Aniston had reached her absolute breaking point. The composed, professional actress who had weathered decades of Hollywood scrutiny finally let her true feelings explode to the surface. "You know what, Stephen? You want to talk about talent? Let's talk about yours. What talent does it take? To sit behind a desk every night and mock people who actually create something? What talent does it take to build a career on cheap shots and manufactured outrage?" The words hit Colbert like physical blows, and his face contorted with a rage that was genuinely frightening to witness. "How dare you question my—" "I'm not finished." Aniston's voice rose to a level that silenced the entire studio. "You've spent the last 20 minutes attacking my work, my character, my integrity, and my choices. You've tried to humiliate me on national television for reasons I can't even begin to understand. But here's what I know about real talent. It doesn't need to destroy others to shine." The audience burst into spontaneous applause, finally given someone to cheer for after witnessing such a one-sided assault. The sound seemed to fuel Aniston's confidence as she continued her devastating counterattack. "You want to know what courage looks like? It's not hiding behind a desk taking potshots at guests who can't fight back on equal terms. It's getting up every day and trying to bring something positive into the world, even when people like you are determined to tear it down." Colbert tried to interrupt, but Aniston's momentum was unstoppable. "I've spent 30 years in this business, and I've worked with some of the most talented, generous, brilliant people in the world. And yes, I've also worked with bullies and megalomaniacs who think cruelty is clever. Congratulations, Stephen. You just showed everyone which category you belong in." The studio erupted in cheers and standing ovation from an audience that had completely turned against their host. Even some crew members were applauding, abandoning any pretense of neutrality. Colbert stood frozen, finally comprehending the magnitude of what he had done and how completely it had backfired. "You came after my career, my activism, my character, and my integrity," Aniston continued, her voice now carrying the authority of someone who had found her power. "But here's what you can't attack. The decades of joy I've brought to people, the friendships I've built, the positive impact I've tried to make. That's something you'll never understand, because it requires empathy." Security finally moved in, not to restrain Aniston but to create a barrier between her and Colbert, who looked like he might physically lash out. The host's face was a mask of humiliation and barely contained fury as he realized he had been completely outmaneuvered by someone he had tried to destroy. "This interview is over," Aniston declared, gathering her belongings with dignity and tact. "And frankly, so is any respect I might have had for you or this show. I came here to have a conversation, but you wanted a fight. Well, you got one. And you lost." As she walked toward the exit, the entire studio audience rose to their feet in a thunderous standing ovation. People were cheering, whistling, and shouting words of support. "We love you, Jennifer!" someone screamed from the balcony. "You're amazing!" called out another. Colbert, left standing alone on his stage, looked around at the chaos he had created. His own audience was booing him. His crew was looking at him with disgust and disappointment, and the woman he had tried to humiliate had just delivered one of the most powerful speeches in television history. "Cut!" someone finally yelled from the production booth, but it was too late. The damage was irreversible. As Aniston reached the exit, she turned back one final time. "I hope someday you figure out the difference between entertainment and cruelty. Until then, maybe you should look in the mirror before you start lecturing others about talent and integrity." With that, she walked out, leaving behind a studio in complete chaos and a host whose career would never recover from the disaster he had created. The audience continued cheering long after she disappeared, while Colbert stood motionless, finally understanding that he had just destroyed everything he had worked to build. Within hours, clips of the confrontation would spread across every social media platform. By morning, Team Jennifer would be trending worldwide, while Fire Colbert would dominate the conversation. The incident would become a defining moment about respect, professionalism, and the power of standing up to bullies, no matter how big their platform. Stephen Colbert had tried to tear down Jennifer Aniston, but instead he had revealed the worst of himself while she showed the world what real class and courage looked like. In the end, the confrontation that was meant to destroy her had instead destroyed him, proving that sometimes the best response to cruelty is simply refusing to be broken by it.